Hello, Magic players. Barry White from MagicUntapped.com, Magic Untapped on YouTube. We have a brand new set coming out tomorrow called Strixhaven. It's been out on Arena, but we don't want to talk about that. We're talking about the paper game. And with me to talk about that is Wizards of the Coast, Gavin Verhey. Gavin, man, what's up? How you doing?
So excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, Barry. And talking about Strixhaven. This is a set I have waited for to talk about for a long time. And I am so stoked to be here today talking with you about it. So yeah, let's get into the good stuff.
Well, let's start by talking a bit about the set story, get the Vorthos stuff out of the way. What is the narrative being told here?
Yeah, so the deal with Strixhaven is it's about these 5 colleges in the school of Strixhaven on the plane of Arcavios. So Arcavios is actually the name of the world, but Strixhaven is a college there. So maybe we'll come back someday and see other colleges or something. Who knows? But anyway, so there's all 5 of these colleges, and Rowan and Will show up here and start attending school. And well, all kinds of hijinks show up, and you'll have to wait and read all the fiction to see exactly what happens. But needless to say, it's not as easy as school might normally be.
Now, timeline-wise, Will and Rowan, is this before their appearance in Battlebond? Where does this lay in the timeline compared to Eldraine? Or is it sequential as printed?
Yeah, we've seen Rowan and Will a few times before. We saw them in Battlebond. We saw them on Eldraine. And it's kind of a continuing story of their adventure after Eldraine. And, they're having a good time over at Wizard School.
I guess in a nutshell here, where did the idea to do a set based around a wizard school come about? I mean, any inspirations or internal discussions?
Yeah, so this idea has been with us for a very, very long time. But both the way the set turned out mechanically and the way that the set turned out flavorfully. One thing we wanted to do for a very, very, very long time is do a set that is really focused on factions that is not Ravnica. Because we've done Ravnica a bunch of times. We all love Ravnica. I love Ravnica. You probably love Ravnica. But we also knew that given we want Magic to last forever, we couldn't just have the only 2 color factions that we ever did that were meaningful at all be on Ravnica. So this idea was kind of born of the idea of, what if we did a set around 2 color factions that wasn't Ravnica this time? And we could look at some, the way those colors interact in a different fashion. So we had that idea, and then we were looking at different tropes to mesh it with. Like, what would make this plane interesting, right? What's the unique thing we could do? And I actually did a lot of work on factionalization. I'm really passionate about it. I believe factionalization is like a huge driver to getting people excited about anything, whether it's sports or games or politics or whatever. So I made a list of a bunch of really cool things, and I sent it over to the creative team. I gave a bunch of presentations on it. And then I don't know if it was directly responsible or indirectly responsible, but they were like, we should do wizarding schools for this one, which is one of the things on my list. And it's so resonant, So I grew up with a bunch of wizarding school stuff. I'm sure you've probably read a lot of it or watched a lot of it. And it's something that a lot of players, I think, can really tap into and understand. And the fun, unique thing here, I think, is even for people who don't know that medium, unlike a lot of wizarding school genre, the classes people are going to aren't like, divination necessarily. Just like, hey, I'm an art student, I'm a math student, I'm a biology student, and you see people like doing these quote unquote real world things, but in a magical way and setting, which is kind of a unique take on it as well. So even if you have no experience with the genre, you can take your own college experience and apply it to Strixhaven.
Now, this is a question more for an old school player like myself. How do you take a school of mages like Strixhaven and not fall into the trap of making it like another school of mages that a lot of old school players know, the Tolarian Academy? How do you stay away from making them too similar?
Really, at the heart and soul of Strixhaven are these 2 color colleges. And the Tolarian Academy, while a very famous and prestigious school, is very blue focused, right? It's all about artifacts and learning, and it's very, 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 very blue. Here you see 5 different interpretations of the college. You explore all of the colors of Magic. So I think that does a lot of really good work towards differentiating them.
Now, getting to the actual cards, what can players expect, in drafting and just cracking open packs for fun? What are people going to find in here? What sort of themes and what sort of nuances might they see?
Yeah, so one of the things that's going on with Strixhaven is it's a wizard school, and we thought, hey, what would be a sensible mechanic for a wizard school to do? And of course, casting spells makes a lot of sense. So we focused on a bunch of spell casting here. There's a mechanic called a Magecraft, which is on creatures and permanents. It says whenever you cast a spell, do an effect, or a non-creature spell, an instant or sorcery spell. Do an effect. And if you cast one or copy it, you do the thing. So it tells you to play out your creature or permanent, and then cast some spells and trigger Magecraft, which is really, really cool. Additionally, we have this really, really fun mechanic that I love called Learn Lesson, which our cards allow you to pull in instant sorceries from outside the game. So a card might say, for example, draw a card and then learn. And when you do that, you get to go into your sideboard or outside the game, or if you're playing just casual around the kitchen table, and grab a lesson card and put it into your hand, which is A, gets more spells into your deck, but B, is really, really fun to kind of have that toolbox thing going on. And then finally, a really big mechanic that you'll see here returning is the Moto double face cards. We've seen these in a few sets so far, Kaldheim and Zendikar Rising. And here you're seeing, cards that show off like a spell on one side or a creature on the other to kind of get more spells into your deck, or both sides of the deans of the college, right? The red dean and the white dean on opposite sides from each other. So those are some of the things you can expect to see here, among many others.
Okay, and for those viewing, I do have to apologize. Zoom is doing its Zoom thing, and luckily the audio is good, but every now and then it's a little bit of a video feed problem. But, we're just going to truck on through this because it doesn't change the content at all, Gavin?
And look, Strixhaven's a long ways away. Like it's a long distance connection here, Barry. It's just the magic is interfering.
So the blind eternities got to make a right at Chandelar, then a left at Ogolgrotha, and next thing you know, you're here.
Right. It's simple directions, but the blind eternities stuff happens in there. It's gnarly sometimes.
It is. But getting back to the Strixhaven School of Mages set, as the cards were being created, Gavin, were there any cards or pairs or themes that proved troublesome? Like a card that really just took a lot of time and effort and tweaking just to get right.
Yeah, well, I'd say going back to the mechanics, a lot of the mechanics were like that. I'll give you a great example. Learn Lesson. So I described it a moment ago. This was a mechanic we actually tried originally in Kaladesh. And that was, 6 years ago now, maybe something like that, 5-6 years ago. And we tried it as this, we called it Invent. So you'd play a card that invented and go grab a 1 mana cost artifact from outside the game and put it into your hand. But it ended up being really problematic in Kaladesh. Kaladesh was very complicated already, so we cut it from the set. And we had been looking for a place to put it ever since. And we decided to try it here. But as you might imagine, when you're pulling from a toolbox of cards from outside the game, there's like a very narrow edge you walk, because if none of the cards are any good, no one plays with any of the learn cards. And if there's one card that's better than all the others, everyone plays with just that one learn card. So you have to kind of create like a mix of interesting things you might want to put in your sideboard to go and grab. So that one took a lot of tweaking, iterating to get it right, just the learn lesson mechanic across the board. Also, the Moto double face cards, like this year was our first time doing them, and we were going to have to release Strixhaven without having seen the results of any of the other Moto double face cards, right? Because we work so far in advance. So working really hard on those to try and get those right and interesting was a really big part of what was going on here. As far as specific cards go, the cards that almost always take us the longest are the Planeswalkers, because getting all those, there's so many knobs you can turn on them. Getting all of those loyalty abilities correct, getting the mana costs right, getting all the abilities right, just takes a lot of time and iteration. So cards like Professor Onyx or Kasmina or Luca are all good examples of this. Luca being a modal double face card Planeswalker especially has a lot of things going on with it that would make it complicated.
Definitely a bit on the higher end of difficulty, both on your end and on the player's end, just because of everything it can do. Now, in making cards for not just Strixhaven, any new set, standard legal set, how do you guys at Wizards balance what's new and what'll pop with how it can affect other formats, not just like Commander, but also older Eternal formats like Legacy and Modern and maybe even Vintage for the people out there that play Vintage?
Yeah, and Barry, there's a ton of Magic cards out there, right? There's over 20,000 now. And we ultimately know we can't try everything in every Eternal format because there's so many Magic cards to combine it with. but we can try and balance our best for those formats. So when it comes to individual cards, we spend a lot of time thinking about and playtesting games with older formats to try and see if something will break. But it is hard to get those older formats right. What I'll say from a bigger structural perspective, what I'll say is that with Strixhaven, one of the things we were trying to do was tap into something that wasn't just the Ravnica guilds. So for each of the 5 colleges, we tried to do something that the Ravnica guild was not doing. For example, Golgari, the Black-Green Guild on Ravnica, is about death and reanimation. On Strixhaven, it has this life gain theme. It has some sacrifice. The Boros, the Red-White Guild, are about like attacking. And here with Lorehold, there's a bunch of different like graveyardy stuff going on and some spirit synergies. So one of the things we try to do, especially for Commander, is focus on what are some new things we could do to open up these color combinations. So it's not so much about, I think the more interesting part of the question is not just like, how did you make these things not break in internal formats, but how did you open up new space for those formats? And I'm really excited to see people in Commander and other internal formats too, talk about how this is giving them cards that are so different from what they would normally have to use and play with. So that's been a really exciting part of it for me.
Now, as a kind of a sort of a subset, I guess you can call it in Strixhaven, are these mystical archive cards. They're gorgeous. They're beautiful. What's the story behind these cards, and how, once you decided we're going to do this, how do you guys there at Wizards decide what cards didn't make the cut?
Yeah, the Mystical Archive is awesome. If you haven't seen them, they are unique frame cards that are a combination of spells from throughout Magic's history. There's everything from Tainted Pact to Lightning Bolt. So from the obscure weird card to the classic staple, and they look amazing. For a little while now with drafts, we've toyed with the idea of trying out a bonus sheet, and the reason why is it can make drafts have a lot of replayability. When you look at things like Time Spiral, or even Time Spiral Remastered as a great example, having that 121 card bonus sheet means that when you play, it just makes every single draft feel very different because you're seeing a different slice of cards than you would normally see, right? If you have a 121 card bonus sheet, you got to go 5 drafts before you might see the same card twice off that sheet. So we knew this really spiced up draft was interesting. And we've also been looking for, ways to use our booster fun treatment, which is this idea we started with Eldraine of putting new and unique styles of card frames on our cards. And so with Strixhaven, it seemed like a great natural fit of a lot of things. We have this bonus sheet idea to try out in a draft set. It was all about spells, so keying into old spells could be cool. We want to do more of the booster fun stuff. So we thought we'd give it a roll here. And the kind of the hallmark of these cards is they're not legal in standard unless the card is already legal in standard, but they are legal in draft. So they're a way to make draft feel like powerful and interesting, have this high level of variance without causing any trouble to the standard format, and also getting more reprints and staples out to the folks who need them. Another cool thing about these cards, to your point about picking them, is they span the range from cards that were previously common all the way up the chain. So it's a cool way to get awesome versions of cards that players love out there. So when you're blinging out your Commander deck or your Modern deck or what have you, you can go find a really cool version of Lightning Bolt or Tainted Pact or whatever the card is.
Now, the art style on these Mystical Archive cards, I know, Gavin, I know you're not the art director, but the art style is a huge departure from what's seen, not just in the base Strixhaven set, but really just kind of the art direction in recent years altogether for Magic sets. How did the art direction for the Mystical Archive cards differ, as far as you're aware, to that in the base set?
Yeah, a lot is the simple answer there. So the deal is on Strixhaven, there's this library. And in this library is a copy of, give or take, every spell ever cast, right? So the students can go and study all these different spells from throughout different planes. And the people on Strixhaven know about other worlds. So you can even get things like, Inquisition of Kozilek in there, which is very much a non on Arcavios thing to do. And so because of that, we tried to make a lot of the depictions look like things that you might actually find in a scroll or in a textbook, like, an artist rendition of, I heard about the spell, or I saw the spell, one of those things, and write that in there. So it was kind of like the flavor informed the function a little bit, because we knew we wanted to do something different. We knew these would have a special treatment, but it was a matter of making the frame, which big hats off to James Arnold for helping make that frame. And then kicking that frame along with, hey, can we get some unique art to put in these frames? Those kind of two things just really sang together and then created this very flavorful in-world feel for these, where when you see one, it's like, yeah, maybe that is a depiction on a textbook somewhere, and that's pretty cool.
And related to that, we have the Japanese cards, which have their own art, but very unique art compared to the already unique non-Japanese language Mystical Archive cards. Where did the decision go to do a parallel subset with the Japanese language and with wholly new art for that?
Yeah, so we're always looking for cool new ways to work with our other partners and Wizards offices around the world to create really cool promotions. And Japan is huge on card games, and they really have a unique aesthetic style, right? Japan has such this long history of artwork. And so with War of the Spark, we saw this awesome Japanese planeswalker treatment go really well. There's kind of these like manga style planeswalkers, and players love that. And so for this set, when it's like, hey, it's another spring set, hey, you're doing something unique with this group of cards, the Japan team was like, hey, what if you tried doing this, something like this? And we're like, that sounds really cool. Magic is a global game, and so I love it when we can work with our partners in other offices to bring cool stuff like this to life. So it was, a collaborative effort, which is really cool. And one thing I do want to say too is that I get the question a lot, like, hey, why is it Japan that always seems to get these cool treatments, right?
I was just thinking that.
Why is it the Japanese planeswalkers? Why is it this? We've worked with them a lot, right? We've done a lot of cool stuff with them, and card games are huge in Japan, and they have a very distinct visual style. It's kind of attached to like the traditional Japanese artwork or manga anime style stuff. But that is not at all to say that there are not many other places in the world where that could be the case. Every country has its own great unique history of artwork and its own cool visual styles it's brought to the world, and its alternate takes it could do. So I'm hopeful that in the future we can do not only stuff like this with Japan, but also all kinds of different countries, because there's so much. When I think about Latin American culture, there's so many cool things down there we could do, right? And when I think about a lot of different European countries, so much cool stuff there we could do. So we've seen a little bit of dabbling in this, but I do hope that in the future we can not only do this kind of promotion with Japan, but all kinds of countries around the world to create some really cool stuff.
Maybe see an Italian set with Renaissance era art, a Greek set with some artwork that is reminiscent of maybe ancient Greek pottery and what have you. So those doors are open.
Yeah, and we've played with it a little bit. Like when we did Theros Beyond Death on the showcase Planeswalker cards, they kind of had like this statue look to them, as if they were like, Greek statues that were built. So we've played with this a little bit here and there. And we've done things like the Global series, which were these two Chinese mythology focused decks, right?
I remember those.
But I think there's even more space to play with this in the future. And as someone who loves traveling, frankly, and has seen Magic players all around the world, I think it's so awesome when your game speaks to you by saying, yes, this is your culture. We're bringing this to you. So I'm not going to say there's necessarily anything happening anytime soon, but if we got a cool proposal from another country to work on something, I personally would leap at the chance to do something cool with them.
Travel out there doing in person.
Yeah, really, that's a good excuse for me to go out there and check it out. Once it's safe, of course.
Once it's safe, of course. All right, now finally, Gavin, I got one more for you. I know you're really busy today. What do you and Wizards of the Coast as a whole hope Magic players get out of the set? When a player opens a pack, plays with the cards, whether it's sealed or draft, or they put it into their own existing decks, what do you and the folks that are at Wizards really hope the reaction is to these Strixhaven cards?
For me, Barry, it all comes back to the end about these factions, right? We're trying out this thing of 5 brand new factions. They are the same color combinations that you might know from Ravnica, but they're different. And a big test for us was, would players identify with these factions? Would they say that I'm a Prismari or I'm a Silver Quill, despite the fact that the Ravnica factions already exist? Or will they just always call them the Ravnica factions? And I think the response so far has overwhelmingly been yes. I know that there's so many people who are like, I'm not really Izzet, but I'm Prismari. I identify with these artsy people. Like for me personally, I'm not Orzhov, but I identify with Silver Quill. And that is super cool to me that we've given people a new lens under what, the Magic personality test guys to be able to talk about about how they play the game and who they are as a person. So years from now, even after Strixhaven is long gone, people are talking about the draft environment with a wistful look in their eye. I hope people will still say, yes, I identify as Silver Quill, or I identify as Quandrix or Prismari or Lorehold, or Witherbloom. So those factions are really the core and heart of the set, and I hope what players will take away and carry with them for a long time forward.
And of course, most importantly, people identify as gamers and Magic players and just good human beings in the end of the day. And Gavin, you are a very good human being. Thank you so much for joining me, and to our viewers. I mean, it's Zoom, it's technology, it happens. Thank you for sticking with us through this all. And yeah, Strixhaven comes out tomorrow morning. I know I'm jazzed. Gavin, you're jazzed.
Oh, absolutely! I can't wait to both not only have the real set out there, the full normal set out there, but also the Commander decks, which launch at the same time too. So a lot of cool stuff coming out with Strixhaven.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Gavin, and we'll do this again soon.
Talk to you soon, Barry.